Let's talk to Alan Tolhurst, Chief Reporter at Politics Home. Alan, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Greetings of the season. I suppose we can do the thing that we would normally be doing, I suppose, in a week from now, looking back on Keir Starmer's kind of, report card, giving him marks out of 10. I'm assuming that you, like many other commentators, would say it hasn't been the greatest of starts for this Prime Minister, has it?
No, I think when the liaison committee finished up their hearing yesterday and Starmer knew that he'd kind of finished what he had to do in terms of parliamentary stuff ahead of Christmas, I think he was probably quite relieved to get out of Parliament. I think it's not been the best few months for him, and yeah, I think he's I think of his report card would probably say must do better.
Must do better. Yeah, we were expecting a little bit better than this. Let's have a look at what he actually said in front of the parliamentary liaison committee yesterday.
Is there anything that you would do differently if you were starting out now, knowing what you know?
No, we had to do tough stuff. We're getting on with it, and I'm very pleased to be delivering from a position of power rather than going around the division lobbies losing every night. I've had too much of that.
Well, thank you very much.
As ever, he didn't quite answer the question because he must have some regrets. He must wish that things had turned out slightly differently, even in terms of the way that people have sort of perceived what he's doing. And he keeps talking about delivering things. He was asked this question by Harry Cole the other day when he was in Estonia, have you made any mistakes? And he kept saying, well, the thing is, we're working towards getting people to feel like they're better off, which they're not. And then he said, we're working towards getting the waiting list down in the NHS, which they're not doing. I mean, I don't know whether he's delusional when he says, we're delivering this. Because what is he delivering exactly?
Well, I think it's quite funny because, it's a sort of answer that if Boris Johnson had delivered that sort of answer and said, no, there's nothing I would do differently, I'm happy with every single decision I've made, no regrets, then when Keir Starmer was opposition leader, he'd have had a right go at him and called him delusional and unable to see the failure of his ways. So it's quite interesting that when he sits in that chair, he's suddenly doing the complete opposite, and he's suddenly saying that as well. But yeah, I think I don't think Labour have actually got as bad a story to tell as some people think. I think they have actually been getting on with quite a lot of stuff. They've just been quite bad, I think, at kind of telling the story of what they've been doing over the past 6 months, and they've allowed kind of the narrative to be taken over by things like the winter fuel allowance, which took place kind of in a bit of a vacuum over the summer. Obviously, the budget was overshadowed by, quite a small part of it, which was this farmers, in the agricultural inheritance stuff, and that overshadowed what actually was a really wide-ranging, massive kind of, I think we'll look back and think it's one of the most important budgets, over the past sort of 20 years. And it allowed a lot of things to be kind of overtaken by the very small things. Assisted dying is not even part of their manifesto, not something that they were going to be pushing through. And that's taken over a huge amount of time in terms of, the political discussion. So they've not really been able to kind of control the narrative and set the agenda, I think, in the way they would want to as a government, especially a very powerful government as this one is. And they've kind of allowed things, other stuff to kind of take over, and that's why it looks a bit like they're still on the back foot as we head into Christmas.
But don't you think they were slightly taken aback as well by the reaction to the budget? Because they obviously had worked on it, and they'd obviously thought that this is going to be great. Everyone's going to be going, this is fantastic. Look at what they're doing. They're recalibrating the economy. They're making sure that fairness is now the watchword as opposed to allowing loads of rich people to get richer and loads of poor people to get poorer. But this morning on the front page of the Times, I mean, you say it's an important budget. Front page of the Times, Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, basically says the economy is stagnating because of the budget. And so there is zero growth, not only now, but on the horizon for the next several months and possibly all of next year.
Yeah, no, completely. It's a pretty unhelpful intervention by Andrew Bailey on that, and he, the bank, specifically highlight one of the key measures that was part of the budget, which was this increase in employers' national insurance contribution. And as the government, I think, were trying to be a bit too clever because obviously they'd made this big commitment. They weren't going to raise income tax, national insurance, or VAT on working people, so they sort of introduced it the other way around by doing it at the back end on employers. And I think, you're right. It's a bit naive to think that wouldn't have a big impact on businesses, especially when business is so key to driving economic growth. And as a result, we're seeing pretty stagnant economic growth and forecasts of continued stagnant growth. And we know how important everything is. Richard Reeves talks about how important growth is to everything they want to do.
But wouldn't that mean that if they were to be sensible, if they were to be an honest government, they would actually put their hands up and go, do you know what, this has actually not worked as well as we thought it would work, and therefore we might have been wrong about it. instead of just blithely going on and saying that they haven't got any regrets and that, you know, they wouldn't do anything differently and everything's going well, we're delivering for the people. You know, it's nonsense, it's BS, and people aren't interested in hearing lies, basically.
Yeah, and I think actually politicians of all stripes are always pretty kind of wary of doing U-turns. I think that a U-turn is a sign of weakness, and sometimes it can look bad. But I think most of the time, if you say, look, we tried something, it didn't work, we didn't have all the information at the time, we didn't know how people were going to respond to it, we've seen how it's landed, we're going to change tack and do something different. You know, I think people would probably respect that a lot more, I think. Definitely. Sometimes. I think politicians are very scared, and, you know, just Labour, I think previous governments as well, but it's a continued trend, and I think, you know, obviously I think they'd be loath to change something like the national insurance contribution because it has such a big impact. It's going to garner so much more money for the Treasury that it would kind of put a big dent in their spending plans. But I think on other things, I think they should be a bit more willing to say, you know, look, we're a new government, we've been out of power for a long time, we're new to this, we're not going to get everything right, and actually we are going to change tack on stuff. And instead, standing in front of, you know, MPs and saying, I have zero regrets, I wouldn't change anything so far.
But what's going to happen over the next few months, though, Alan, is that jobs are going to be lost. People have said that they're going to be having to fire people. They're not going to be hiring anybody. Hiring's at an all-time low since 2009 because of the national insurance rise. And, you know, the state of the economy is only going to get more and more fragile as time goes on. So, I mean, it's not just about admitting that they got it wrong. It's about actually intervening to make sure the economy doesn't collapse altogether, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I was speaking to people around Labour who think that actually what they need to do is hold their nerve, that some of these are big changes and they're going to take a while to come through, and it's going to be bumpy to begin with, but eventually things will smooth out and things will start to
Well, no, you say that,
better.
But where's the evidence that the economy is going to improve? Where? In which part of the economy is there going to be any growth? There isn't,
Mike, I want to stress this is not my view. This is just what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I want your view, because you're telling me that, you know, things are going to kind of bottom out and it's all going to be fine in the end, and that may be what they believe. But I'm asking you, where do you see that happening? Because I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I think the big issue is businesses and how they do respond to it, because, as you say, there is perhaps a freeze on hiring at the moment, and there is obviously, I think they've clearly responded quite negatively to those changes in the budget. I think what they're going to want to see is some more other issues, other stuff coming from the Treasury before they kind of relent and actually think that, you know, they are willing to invest and spend that money and hire, because I think that the Treasury's got a better handle on stuff. I think that the kind of business confidence is, you know, Labour spent a long time in opposition trying to kind of win back business after the kind of the Corbyn years, and I think that some of that work was undone over the past 6 months. They're going to have to go and work again, I think, to convince business they do have all the answers, and that will help them kind of invest and kind of smooth over these kind of these tricky periods. But it's not going to be easy, and as you say, the indicators at the moment are not that it's going to happen, certainly in the short term. So there's kind of a long way to do. Obviously, we've got the spending review in the spring. Rachel Reeves is not likely to give a spring budget, but she might have to give perhaps some sort of spring statement, I think, to calm some of those business concerns if we are to kind of see them kind of be the engines of growth again in 2025.
So do you think they're going to have to, you know, cut taxes in the new year? Because it says here, growth forecasts that have come out today from the Bank of England and others, other economists, are a massive blow to Labour, which has pledged to improve living standards and make Britain the fastest growing economy in the G7 club of developed nations. But Labour have already said they're no longer chasing that particular dream because it's not attainable, right? And what we know is that companies are responding to the budget by increasing prices and cutting jobs. Well, that's not going to change unless they change the tax regimen, is it?
Yeah, I think it's tricky, because I think Rachel Reeves does not want to go back and have another kind of full kind of fiscal event, I think, in the spring. But I think there's probably going to have to be, you know, something around the spending review, around kind of those OBR, we'll do those projections, I think, in the spring. I think they're perhaps going to have to be, if it's not kind of, you know, a full kind of economic fiscal event, I think there is perhaps going to have to be some sort of tweaks to some of those things. I think even if it's just to give a signal to business that they kind of understand those concerns and aren't just going to keep ploughing on, despite the fact that people are saying that it's harming what they want to do. I think there's going to have to be some
trouble is, I don't think they do understand it. Let's have a look at what Keir Starmer said before Rachel Reeves actually delivered the budget, and look at the smile on his face as he says it.
It will also be the first budget delivered by a woman ever. That is a moment of pride. When Rachel Reeves stands up, she will be making history. And I can tell you, young women and girls across the country will be watching, they will look up, and they will notice.
Yeah, there's hordes of young women and girls going, whatever you do, don't become the next Chancellor of the Exchequer, because look what happened to Rachel Reeves. It's a bleeding disaster, you know. And if she's representative of women doing that job, I'm afraid I don't want to be put in the same category. You know, he's so obsessed with, you know, women can be chancellors that he's forgotten that the job is actually more important than the gender.
Yeah, I've got to say that clip is quite cringy, isn't it?
It's awful.
Yeah.
And who cares? You know, he's almost sort of patronising in the extreme as well. It's like, what? Who would have known? Even women can be Chancellor of the Exchequer. Well, so what? You know, why is that even important?
Yeah, and I think it's a slight overcompensation from Labour, because I think they always feel, you know, they look over the Conservatives. You've had 3 female leaders, 3 female prime ministers, and Labour have never had a female leader. So I think that's why they're kind of over-indexing on the fact that they've had the first female chancellor, I think, because they've always felt that, you know, it's kind of a bit of a blind spot for them. They've only ever elected men as their leader, and obviously they're meant to be the more progressive party. So I think that's why you hear a lot of this kind of stuff, and it does look a bit cringy. It's sort of like as if it's sort of, you know, it does look as though she's not earned it. She's been given it because she's a woman, which is not true, but that's the way it seems. If you keep banging on about the fact that she's a woman delivering the budget, wouldn't it be more interesting to know what's in the budget than knowing more about the person?
And why should it be remarkable that somebody who is actually a female can do a job? You know, it's really, I find it really, really ridiculous. But Alan, listen, have a good Christmas. Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Alan Tolhurst, Chief Reporter from Politics Home.